Hello, everyone. May I have your attention, please? We start our panel dedicated on critical minerals in Africa in few minutes. I'll just ask you to please come at the front side so we can start in few minutes. So we are going to start our panel. I'm just going to ask our dear panelists to please join us on stage. I'll call Koda Majonjo to please join the stage. Anna Carolina, Mr. Koile, and Tato. Also calling on stage my friend Ryan to please join the panel. Thank you all for the time given to join this panel on a very important topic at global stage, but especially in Africa, which is the critical minerals. As you already know, Africa holds the vast reserves of critical minerals, which is essential for the global shift to clean energy, but the competition to secure these resources has created a new geopolitics of supply chains dominated by developed countries. So this rush risks repeating the resource curse that left African nations impoverished during the oil and gas era, meaning that without a stronger governance, strong governance, beneficiation, and justice-focused policies, Africa risks becoming a sacrifice zone for the global transition. So to talk about this important topic, we have a very high-level panel with us today, with activists from all over the world, with different perspectives from different continents, to give their opinions, their point of view on this topic. I'll start with Mr. Kura Majonjo, who is a climate and political activist based in Zimbabwe, working as a just transition advisor and legal on critical minerals and green industrialization at PowerShift Africa. His main interests are global solidarity economy. He has held professional roles in both academia and civil society in the education, agriculture, and renewable energy fields. His academic interests are informal labor dynamics, political economy, and green industrialization in Africa. He also the author of a fiction book called Aluta Continua, The Struggle Continues, and holds an MA in Labor and Globalization from the University of Witwatersrand. He is also a Mandela Rhodes Scholar and currently PhD Fellow with the Southern Center for Inequality Studies, undertaking the PhD studies on economic inequality driven by political patronage. We also have on the panel Madam Anna Carolina, Senior Director for Programs at Natural Resource Governance Institute. She works closely with thematic and regional programs staff across energy to advance strategic priorities and drive reform in the countries where energy operates. She leads targeted efforts to increase the impact and effectiveness of energy's work by strengthening global economy and contextual analysis, as well as by connecting research, capacity development, grant making, and advocacy at multiple levels. She also oversees designated strategic portfolios such as gender, youth, and communities, and supports energy's work on the just energy transition. She has nearly 20 years of academic and professional experience in development, especially in relationship to resource governance, community participation, climate change, and the energy transition. Most recently, she worked as a senior program officer to the National Resource and Climate Change Program of the Ford Foundation, where she managed grant-making, monitoring, and governing activities for the global initiative. Great. And we also have on the panel my friend Ryan Dudayev from Greenpeace Southeast Asia, as he is active as Global Forest Solution Political Lead. So Ryan is the Global Forest Solution Political Lead at Greenpeace Southeast Asia, based in Indonesia, and his work is principally focused on strengthening environmental governance across the Asian region by integrating right-based approach in protecting landscape and seascape while addressing plastic pollution and biodiversity loss. Since 2025, he has focused on advancing the Forest Solution Project, amplifying the voice and solutions of indigenous people and local communities as key steward of forests. He has been actively following the development of the Tropical Forest Facility, where he identifies both opportunities to advance distributive equity for IPLCs through direct access finance mechanism, as well as critical gaps that must be addressed to ensure genuine and just forest protection. We also have with us this morning Madam Tato Kabetse, hope I pronounced it well. Thank you. Deputy Executive Director at We, The World, and the We campaign. Tato is Botswana-based climate policy strategist and grassroots advocate. She leads national and regional dialogues on just energy transition, gender-responsive climate actions, with contribution of the UNGA, COP forums, and indigenous people strategies. A purpose grantee, Tatu was named among the 100 influential African women in 2025. Her work bridged diplomacy, community mobilization, and sustainable development policy. And last but not least, we have also Kwaile Monaheng, who is the Pan-African political strategist at Greenpeace Africa, where he leads the organization's climate diplomacy and political strategy, providing analytical insight to Africa's evolving political and socio-economic landscape, strengthening campaigns leverage across the continent. His 10-year career spans roles in Climate Action Network International, Power Shift Africa, Just to Share South Africa, Rhodes University, with expertise in renewable energy access, climate justice, and multilateral engagement. As climate and energy specialist and social entrepreneur, Kwale also leads initiatives through Hansha Energy to electrify rural communities in Lesotho Highland, integrating smart technologies to bridge the digital divide and advance local resilience. Recognized by Forbes under 30 and CNN's Inside Africa, his work champions African agency shaping the global energy transition. It's great personalities, great talent that we have here from all across the world to talk about the critical mineral issue in Africa from their different perspectives. Just to remind you the setup, guys, so it's going to be a one-round table. You will have 5 to 7 minutes to share your perspective through the question that will be addressed to you guys. After that, we will give the public here the opportunity to ask you the questions, and you will provide, of course, the responses for discussion, and you will have the last round where you will share with us your last words, your closing words, and closing remarks. We can go? Good. So I'm starting with my friend Koile. We know that recently Greenpeace Africa just launched a new report on critical minerals landscape in Africa. What I want to know is what's your new critical mineral report telling us about power and dependency, and why does governance now belong to the Just Transition Work Program?
Thank you so much, Kuda. Ibrahima. Thank you so much to the Congo Basin Climate Commission for this opportunity to share our report that we launched a few weeks ago. And really, the question here that we're trying to answer is which lives matter? Which is usually a question, but on the African continent, it's a statement. 2 days ago, artisanal miners lost their lives when a copper cobalt mine collapsed in the DRC due to overcrowding, just this week. According to Global Witness report, between 2001 and 2023, mining for critical minerals was linked to 334 violence or protest events across 19 countries, an average of 111 per year. 5 of those countries are African. So I asked the question again, which lives matter? And the record of mining will show that the ranking of worth starts from minerals, industry, workers, community, and then indigenous peoples. The perfect ingredients for a sacrifice zone. So what is the state of play currently? Where do we sit? What are critical minerals and why are they in demand? So there are different definitions around critical minerals. They are sometimes called green minerals, strategic minerals. And these essentially are the minerals required to ensure that we transition to a world from fossil fuels to renewable energy in the face of climate change. And they are copper, lithium, nickel, rare earth, which are in high demand. And I mean, when we think of the technologies, we're looking at solar panels that require copper and silicon. We're looking at rare earth and copper that's required for wind turbines, as well as lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and manganese, which are required for battery storage. And then where does the African continent fit into this framework? And I think we need to go back to realize that this is not just a continental conversation, but it's also a global South conversation, where the global South has historically played the role of raw material suppliers, but now it's a time to reorientate that posture. In Africa alone, 30% of known mineral, there are 30% of these minerals that are known, with the DRC producing roughly 70% of the world's cobalt from 19 mines. And 15 of these 19 mines are owned by Chinese. You can do the math. China is a global center for critical mineral processing and currently has the lion's share of renewable energy technology globally, whilst the DRC has potential. Fair trade, don't you think so? The danger here that we're seeing is in this definition of criticality that comes from trying to unseat China as a global superhouse in terms of minerals. Well, we're seeing US and EU try to ensure that the market becomes more secure and less insecure because of the volatility due to the importance of diversifying supply chains and processing. Therefore, when we look at an industry history that is already very contentious, this rush exasperates social, economic, and environmental harm, and I'm sure my colleagues will touch on this. And one thing just to note, where are we? We are in Belém at a forest COP in here championing for indigenous people's rights and local community rights. But out there, these critical minerals are pushing the same IPs and LCs, are pushing into the lands rather of the same IPs and LCs through driving deforestation, contributing to GHG emissions, causing environmental degradation, and sacrificing lives. This is not a new conversation, and these issues are not only unique to Africa. It takes 17 years roughly for mineral identification to large-scale production. Yet this process has now been fast-tracked, hence the rush. A transition that is built on the exploitative supply chains of minerals is not simply unjust, it is unstable, unpredictable, and ultimately unsustainable. And when we look at the facts that are coming out of our report, 30% of known minerals are in Sub-Saharan Africa, 56% of the global share of cobalt is in the DRC, South Africa, Zambia, and Madagascar to make electric vehicles. 6% of copper for EV vehicles, 6% of copper for EV vehicles and wind and solar is in the DRC and Zambia. 4% of lithium lies in the DRC, Zimbabwe, and Mali. 4% of nickel lies in Madagascar and South Africa. And then 1% is in Tanzania and Madagascar and Burundi. So are we really a global power, or do we have potential? That is the question that I think we need to unpack. And one thing that's important to also note is this resource curse, or the paradox of the plenty, how vast minerals don't guarantee overnight success. Developing countries know that although rather on the continent, it's projected that this is a $1 trillion industry, projected at tens of billions a year. But due to poor governance, corruption, human rights abuses, our potential means nothing if it cannot be realized. And just to end, I think it's important also to just emphasize what we're calling for. What is this just transition? How we're linking, and I'm sure my fellow speakers will also touch on this topic. We're calling for the restructuring of our societies. This is the restructuring of our societies rather, the need for systemic transformation, the need to reimagine our relationship with raw material sourcing in Africa. We need to also acknowledge the moral responsibility of our relationship with energy, the environment, and people. We need to champion principles of justice and equity that we call for in the multilateral space, also in our own countries. Yet this conversation is still about minerals and mining. And the point of departure of our report and today's discussion is really on those points. So as I conclude, I'd like to situate ourselves in this critical moment in history. In the next days here at COP30 in Belém, as well as the G20 in South Africa, where the future of transition minerals will be decided. A just transition in the context of these minerals is one that prioritizes energy access, human rights, value addition, and beneficiation. And who should be leading the way are producing countries in the global south. It is the only way we can truly break this cycle. And yes, it is true. Critical minerals are essential to achieving a just, orderly, and transition away from fossil fuels. However, it's not worth it if it's at the cost of people and planet. So I ask you again, which lives matter?
A great question there, Mr. Kwale, and that deserves a response. And I have, from our public, but also from our panelists, we can have guidance on which lives matter. Really appreciate your call on reimagining our relationship with energy, the environment, but also with people. because both goes together. There's one that can goes without the other one, and the call also for the global south to lead the way. That takes me to give the floor to Carolina on this topic, like the relationship in the global south, especially what takeaway, what lessons we can learn from like Latin America, for example. So the question is like how, um, from the south to south perspective, what lesson can we take from the Latin America experience, especially on state-led models, benefit sharings, but also community safeguards?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation because I really think these spaces for exchange across regions are very important, and that's part of one of the points that I want to make here. Let me start by sharing a little bit about the place that Latin America is occupying in relation with this discussion. And of course, we know that Latin America, as Africa, stands at a crossroad in this moment between opportunity and risk. We have the 35% of global lithium, the 40% of copper, and other vast reserves in critical minerals. And we know that all these minerals are going to triple, right? And government says that they want to take the opportunity to use this boom in a different way this time to foster value addition, to increase the state participation and revenues, to foster a green industrialization. But we know from the past that this comes with a lot of challenges. And the challenges are not new. They are there: conflict, poverty, inequality, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss. They are all long-standing challenges of the mining sector, but they are intensified by this rush that you just mentioned, but this need of nourish the energy and clean technologies. And so the risks are high because there are persistent inequalities in the sector. Women are still only making 17% of the mining workforce in the region. We know also that these markets of critical minerals tend to be very opaque and very concentrated, and so this is a space for corruption where corruption risk can be higher. And also social environmental risks, because we know that, especially for Latin America, there are new risks arising as lithium is explored, for example, and exploited in Chile. We know that this is exploited in regions that are already suffering from water stress, so new challenges for water. We know that as copper mines start kind of losing their quality, there is an expansion for copper extraction into new zones, including in the Amazon region. And so there is a risk that this new copper extraction will affect a lot of local and indigenous communities, especially if we take into account that there is an overlap of around 75% of transition minerals potential projects in the region with indigenous and local communities' lands. And that those percentages increase. For example, in the case of Mexico, they can reach 97% of overlap, or in the case of Peru, 83% of overlap. So that's a recipe for social and environmental conflict, of course. But what can we learn? And first, because these social environmental risks are not just an ethical imperative, we know that mines are not able to progress, and Latin America has demonstrated that communities and civil society stand up for their rights whenever they are not recognized. And so even if we want to advance in terms of mineral extraction, this is something that we need to consider. In terms of what you ask about what can we learn together, I would say it's not about what Latin America can, share with Africa. I think there is a lot we can share among the two regions. There are a lot of experiences. There is definitely, Latin America experience around, as you mentioned, state-led models, but that requires governance to be very strong. We have, the case of Codelco in Chile, the copper mining state-owned company that has allowed the government and the Chilean people to capture additional revenues, but of course in a context of high-level standards, high transparency standards. For example, in our last resource governance index, that company was ranked almost the second most transparent company SOE in the world. So that requires that level of consciousness. And there are also interesting African experience in terms of exploring the role of the states, like a state-private joint ventures in Botswana that I'm sure you know better than me about, that could be explored that demonstrate that disciplined state participation, commercial governance, and long-term strategic capacity to bargain is important. The second is about benefit sharing. Benefit sharing mechanism across the region is something that is very important in general. We have imperfect, of course, and ready to be improved subnational governments receiving a portion of royalties, so very decentralized mining sharing, mining benefit sharing configurations in Colombia, in Peru, in Brazil. And also, I would say the development of local suppliers. Part of the success of the Chilean model is not only to advancing necessarily value addition, but ensuring that local suppliers are there ready to provide the mining companies. In recent figures actually suggest that mining suppliers contribute about 7% of Chile's GDP. That's a lot. And that requires, and that has required an important leadership from Chilean's government in identifying those suppliers and identifying those mining companies' needs and etc. But also, these benefit sharing configurations are important along, the Sub-Saharan Africa, and there are important examples from Africa as well. This Mineral Development Fund in Ghana, or the requirements in Tanzania about local development that we can exchange about and learn from. The third point I would like to make is that I guess one important issue in the case of Latin America is the centrality of communities' rights and social legitimacy, and the progress that we have made in terms of community consultation, free, prior, and informed consent, along with, of course, robust licensing reforms. Of course, our problem in the region is most about implementation and enforcement of those rules as usual, but that includes also no-go zones that needs to be considered for the protection of important biodiversity zones, understanding where this can be done, where there is a no-go zone, because we need to protect the lives and the important ecosystems as well. And the final thing I would say is that beyond exchanges experience across countries, which I think is very important. It is very important because I think we have tended to receive recipes from the global north in many occasions, but at the end there is so much we can learn in the global south through south-south learning and knowledge exchange, also because there are new minerals out there, new things that we are trying, and we need this kind of live discussions. But there is also the possibility for Africa and Latin America to form a better possibility for blocks in negotiating. We can see it here. If Latin America and African countries were together pushing for the inclusion of mining in the Just Transition Working Program, this would be like a very important and powerful forces that would be difficult to defeat. So strengthen those collaboration, including across business opportunities. So it is not just about opportunities for the global north in our countries, but opportunities for business and across the region. I think that's also an important point to consider. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. It's amazing. I just note the collaboration needed between the blocks, between Africa. I would also include South Asia also, but also the Latin America, which will only help us sharing knowledge and best practices to make sure that in our regions, our resources are well used, where needed, and for who needed. So I'm turning to Mr. Kuda because we know that we are in Belém right now at this COP. So in this moment where we are here right now in Belém, how the Belém Action Mechanism is shaping the Just Transition Work Program, and what does a good COP outcome will look like for Africa?
Uh, Hello, everybody. Since we're in Congo space, bonjour, mes amis. I hope you're all well. Y- Fantastic. You see, I was not just talking to myself. And yes, I think I've been speaking about BAM for the last year of my life, just to reach to this moment. And I'm hoping that we actually get something. But for those who might not be aware, civil society, trade unions, women groups, indigenous peoples from last year in Baku were pushing for what is called a Belém action mechanism. The idea is we realize that there's one big weakness in global transition plans, that there is actually no global just transition institution that cooperates, creates capacity and knowledge sharing for the world. So what you have instead is that countries are trying by themselves, be it in a bilateral manner, in a unilateral manner, or in a regional manner, to have just transition plans. And we were arguing basically that this does not make sense because, as you will very much know, a lot of energy systems, a lot of financial systems are global. So why don't we have a just transition mechanism for the global society? So we ended up setting up this campaign and also a policy tool called the Belém Action Mechanism. The idea being at Belém during this COP to set up a mechanism under the Just Transition Work Program where we have a global institution that supports, coordinates, and is a space for knowledge sharing and hopefully for resource mobilization for just transition plans globally. Now the question is, where are we? This is day 11, day 10, day 11. I'm glad that on Friday last week, or was it Thursday last week, the G77 in China, and I think you spoke about global South solidarity, the G77 in China took up what they call the Just Transition Mechanism, which is close enough to the Belém Action Mechanism. And that for us is very exciting that we got basically 134 countries to think, you know what, this actually makes sense. And in a lot of ways, it does make sense. And I'll give an example. On the African continent, two countries since COP28 have been signaled out for just transition plans. This is South Africa and Senegal. The South African example has gone a bit further. What came in that one, about $10 billion was promised for the just transition. However, only 300 million of it came. And of that 300 million, 60% of it went to consultancies. Absolutely ridiculous. So it was meant to be for workers and communities, but 60% of it went back to consultancies in the global north. Even worse than that, the Just Transition Plan, because it was South Africa, forgot to recognize that the energy system in Southern Africa, where South Africa, a lot of their industry rely on coal from Zimbabwe, gas from Mozambique. So the Just Transition was not going to actually work because the sources of some of the energy was actually not in South Africa. So from the very beginning, the plan was at fault. So we are not saying that national plans do not work. There is room for local and national just transition plans. But if they don't have a regional and global mechanism to support them, they will have loopholes, first of all, or cracks in the system, which will then make them not effectual, or even worse, exacerbate problems in other regions or other countries or other communities in the world. So that is where we are, where the G77 in China are taking it up. In response, we finally got something for the Europeans, what they're calling the Just Transition Action Plan, which is okay. It kind of makes sense. It does speak to some of the things we're calling for, but it does not have one important thing, which is a coordinating platform, basically the actual institution. They are worried that this is a backdoor for financing for just transition, and I tell them that no, financing doesn't have to go through the back door. This is a front door issue. We're not going to try lie that there is need for just transition. However, here at Belém, what we need is a mechanism. Financing is being discussed already in Article 9.1 and the Baku to Belém roadmap. We've always been very clear about that. But under the just transition mechanism, we need that institution set up for the sake of the plans that we have. And on your final point that you asked me around, what are Africa's priorities at COP? I will not speak around all of them, but the three big focuses are certainly public financing for the plans that we need, focusing on adaptation finance as a key cornerstone of that. Just transition plans is extremely important, and of course, the general adaptation space. Those are the three things that Africa, through the Africa Group of Negotiators, are really trying to push for. And we're hoping that because this just transition mechanism is currently in play, and it seems as if it's going to come up and come out with something of it, we're hoping to hold the line for the last 2 days. We'll have something that we can take as we go ahead to really push. And in conclusion, I think we should remind ourselves why this is important. Koile came up with the example, and he started that 30 artisanal miners died when a bridge fell in Congo at a cobalt mine. This is what the just transition mechanism is supposed to protect from, to include the inclusion of informal workers who until now are not recognized in just transition plans globally. But they are such a key conduit of all the iPhones, the laptops, and all the conduits for the energy transition. So what we're speaking for here is a very real thing, speaking to very real necessities that need to be spoken for, and hopefully we can get something from Belém. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing speech, Koda. We could have not expect less from you, such a brilliant activist from Africa. As we come here with Greenpeace, we have a very simple message: justice, action, hope. And your speech reminds us how it's important to have hope and being positive about the outcomes of this COP as African. Hopefully my country, Senegal, will be on the right side of the story, I hope. So in a very gender-based approach, I'm giving the floor to my sister Tato to talk about the tracking of the mineral language. So what I want to know, Tato, is you're tracking the critical mineral language inside the Just Transition Work Program. So what we want, can you please help us connect the dots? What's actually in play at COP30, and how does it land for African producer countries?
Thank you very much. Following on the previous speakers and riding on the Just Transition Work Program annual summary report, which highlights some of the key elements of the Just Transition Working Program and what the G77 and China's proposal for a just transition mechanism to be people-centric and have inclusive adaptation and resilient approaches with a holistic and multidimensional just transition with workforce and economic planning. And I think we did talk about the financing elements of it and what Africa stands to benefit from having a strong position on transition minerals in the outcomes and the decision text. And as we see that we are moving towards Africa being a key player in these conversations and participating meaningfully, and moving away from that extractivism model of then we're depending on donorship and aid, and then standing up and saying, we own these minerals and it is time that we upgrade some of the value chains for our people. Like Kwaile mentioned, we shouldn't be losing lives as much as we are doing if we put into place institutional arrangements, institutional capacities on governance approaches. And some of these things will then feed into international cooperation and how we can stand to benefit on some of the trade or address the barriers that are there in terms of trade and investment. And then this will also translate in how we build capacity and knowledge sharing. There within Africa, I know there's some work that is being done, Africa, Guda, on the mineral development and upgrading to build capacity of Africa. And at a local context, we don't necessarily then are able to negotiate or benefit from all of these models that are at play, and then we'll still stand to be the last to gain something out of it. And the Just Transition report as well acknowledges trade and the economic policies' critical role in climate action, but it also warns against trade restrictive measures that are hindering cooperation and the development. And this is in the annex to para 109 to 112 that then strongly speaks to the unfair trade barriers. And some of the key political messages out of those dialogues, the 4 dialogues that we've had with constituency bodies, with different state parties, in trying to develop the work of the work program and in building an institutional arrangement that works for all the parties, is to have a development-centered, people-focused, and nationally determined a mechanism that reflects the principles of equity, inclusivity, and the CBDR principle, which is aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Yes, we do see some blockers on this front. I will be as diplomatic as possible. On those issues, unfortunately. And from these dialogues, we're trying to move from just talk shops and implementation, as we're seeing that there is the need on operating concrete measures, tools, and mechanisms that will then translate to commitments into real-world impacts. And I think with that from the negotiation side and the Just Transition Work Program, I can only say as much. But we are hopeful that with the Muchirao, as the COP presidency is calling for, we will see more of fairness for all parties. And I'm really hopeful for a different COP this year where indigenous people, local communities are being put and centered at the front. And I'm noticing one other thing, that every time we talk about indigenous people and local communities, it rains. So I think that's a good sign. So thank you very much.
Indeed, that's a good sign because they are the voice that need to be heard, but they are also those who protect our forests, our environment, our climate on a daily basis without asking or waiting for anything. So they need to be deserved and recognized at this level. And talking about the indigenous communities, I have my friend here, Ryan, from GP, Southeast Asia, very active on also in the Indonesia country, who have a lot of track on engaging with local communities, the IPLCs, and so. So Ryan, from the Indonesian perspective to Philippines, what do deforestation, pollution, and labor violation tells us about the cost of poor governance on critical minerals?
Yep, thank you for the opportunity. So from my side, I'd like to enrich the stories that Anna and Kwaile shared before, more on the quantitative side, but from my side, I will go more on the qualitative, where I will zoom in the story coming from the Raja Ampat, Indonesia. And by seeing a story from Raja Ampat, hopefully this can also enrich negotiation shared by Tato, but just transition as well as Kado. And I'm really interested how what's decided here can be also answered, like the problem on the ground actually. And also later on, I would like to touch a little bit about UNIA 7 actually. That will also another opportunity for us to advocate for better and more just critical mineral governance. So Raja Ampat. So if you look at Indonesia, if you imagine where is it located, can you someone share the slide, please? So Indonesia is the one of the biggest reserve nickel in the world. So I'm gonna talk about critical mineral, but specifically about nickel mining. And I'm gonna talk about two things, like the extractive part and also the refinery part, where the nickel needs to be refined, managed to be later sold as a part of like a EV battery. So here is Raja Ampat. It's located in the Coral Triangle. If you imagine, where is it? Like Coral Triangle. So Coral Triangle is really important as a source of food, not only in Indonesia but globally, in Africa, globally. The source of food is especially from the fisheries sector, and Coral Triangle is the richest coral species in the world. It's not the biggest. Australia is the biggest like coral cover in the world, but Coral Triangle is the richest species. And you can see this is like like the beauty of Raja Ampat. Raja Ampat can attract at least like per year like 9.2 million US dollar per year. But can you see in the middle of this like beautiful island, there are nickel mining happening? Can you go like to the next slide, please? Yeah, there she is. So I just want to like like compliment what other speakers like already told. Like there is like deforestation, like at least like 500 hectares like of deforestation every year, and also according to the national law, actually mining cannot be happen in a small island. And this island is less than 2,000 square hectares, but the mining happens, and one of the company operates in this island is mining owned by the state-owned company. So the state also plays role to destroy the beauty the beautiful of island of in Raja Ampat, and that's why. Echoing what other colleagues said, not only critical mining, like connected to the other countries and also region, but also national level, like safeguarding is not enough. We need some kind of like global measurement at some point. And the second thing is also indigenous people of Raja Ampat. This island is not an empty land, but also belongs to the indigenous people of in Raja Ampat. So that's one thing, and the FPIC process, prior informed consent, wasn't conducted properly. And then also, here is also the karst area. If you look at the karst, they really the important source of water globally. So that's one thing. That's something that really never been highlighted before, besides the deforestation. And also, what makes this case like a bit like complicated, actually Raja Ampat considered as one of the UNESCO geopark. But can you imagine, the nickel mining is still happening illegally in this area. And can you imagine like the other island where critical mining activities happening? And what happened with the safeguarding of the environment. So this is one of the most famous like place in Indonesia, but the critical mining happening and with the loss of environmental safeguarding. And one thing I want to say, I want to add maybe something that missing in our conversation here. So Indonesia tried to refine the critical mineral like nickel also in the country, in the island besides of the Raja Ampat. And Indonesia now like has like a strong regulation not to expand like a coal power plant. But for the critical mineral refinery, there is an exception. So they can build coal power plant, a new coal power plant. And now Indonesia from like the rank of like emission, the biggest like emitter in the world, now becomes 6th. And one of the cause of the problems is like the coal power plant developed for refining this critical mineral. So besides like like biodiversity aspect, as of course like human rights aspect, but we really need to question that, is it like really the critical mining the answer of like climate crisis? Because like at some point the process itself like allowing the big like emission to be emitted. So yeah, that's something that we can discuss later, how we can like have like safeguarding at the global level actually. Thank you.
So much, Ryan. We can see how and where poor governance can lead us when our resources and our ecosystem are not well protected. We are losing paradise everywhere in the world, leaving behind the communities and destroying the ecosystems. So here is the wrap-up of the first tour of our roundtable. Thank you for this brilliant insight. So I'm just going to give the floor to those who attend this panel if you have questions to ask to our dear panelists.
Thanks for the amazing panel. My name is Lauren. I'm from Natural Justice. I think just one question to put out to the panel, and I think I really appreciate the sort of the presentations and what's been said, but I think not to be negative, but obviously in Africa, the African Mining Vision came out in 2009 from the African Union, and it spoke about these ideas of owning the minerals, owning our supply chains, being able to see artisanal mining grow. What's different about transition, green, or critical minerals? Why would the most powerful sort of entities like mining companies in these mining states give up these supply chains and make them a lot of money and allow us to then start making that money? And how do we bring that about? Is it about pushing something like the African Mining Vision? Is it about pushing the UN's, obviously, panel reports on critical minerals? Or is it about pushing even the African Union green minerals strategy? And where should we be pushing and at what level? So nationally, international, or regionally?
I'll be quick. I was hoping my boss in this situation, Tacho, would speak. But I think what I think is different for me, Lauren, is that Africa this time is different. I think our governance, our understanding has developed big time over the last 20 years since the AMV was being designed. And I think that's important. If you look at the negotiations with mining companies, the deals that are being made, there's a big push to try renegotiate them, improve them. Not to say that they're always successful, but the very fact that that's happening is definitely a step in the right direction. What then needs to be done, I think, at least in terms of future work, we need to do a lot more of these negotiations at a very basic level through the African Union. The reason for that, there's a lot of negotiating power that comes when we have a base agreement through the African Union for any form of investor that comes on the continent. I'm not saying for the whole agreement or the whole deal to be done through the African Union, but there should be a set of principles that the AU have to sign off on. We should then elevate the amount and type of investments we get, and that way I think it will increase the quality. The details of projects and the likes can then be sorted out at a national level, but there should be a base agreement, be it from a tax point of view, be it from an environmental point of view, that are not a national issue. Those things should never be a national issue, especially when it comes to environment, because this is a one shared environment. We're speaking about the basin here. The basin is not just in the Congo. You know, the Congo is what gave the name to the countries, not the other way around. So this is what we should say, that there's some base things that are not based on a country, and those things should be signed off by the African Union. And that way, we will get better deals. But I would like my boss to speak on my behalf now.
Thank you very much. And to add on to that, I think even Africa now is at a point where it's realizing the intersectionality of all of these issues. We are hemorrhaging money. I mean, we're at debt. So some of these issues are then tying on to how much now we are losing or we're spending towards the social wealth aspect of it, and what we stand to lose if we don't address or cover up some of these wounds if we don't come up together and stand united. And then I'll also add elements on how over the years we've ignored local communities and indigenous people and vulnerable groups to the point that there is no trust in some of the institutions that are there, we've put in place to help us develop. And we're at a time where now we've realized that, and we're trying to come together and build that cooperation and collaboration across all Africa and the children of the soil. Thank you.
Maybe just to take a page out of Botswana's book, there are several successful case studies in the report that we mentioned, and Botswana is a strong example of a country that's escaped the resource curse. Yes, Botswana, through strong institutional legal frameworks that are governing extraction, such as the Diamonds for Development strategy and the creation of a sovereign wealth fund that directly puts natural resource wealth into the hands of citizens. So this is something that we need to take a page out of your book there, and also thinking about, I mean, going back to corruption, free elections, fair elections, zero tolerance for corruption, a highly trained apolitical civic service. That all of these recipes that we have that we can bring together to share in examples of countries and also to bring these to light. So I think that solutions are already on the continent. We just need to be together. We just need to also put our heads together properly in terms of how we stand united. I also think one thing that's important is also the acknowledgement of foreign interference in Africa's development journey. Right, we're negotiating with countries in a very bilateral manner, strong countries that have strong influence, whereas the minerals are very widely spread on our continent. So uniting and ensuring that as a continent, as a bloc, I mean, even here at COP, the Africa group is the bloc with the most numbers, right? And that counts for something, and we should take those lessons back because we can have great examples and working together.
I mean, I know the question directs to like African colleagues here, but I think it's important, like, if I can contribute the importance of like transparency in the supply chain, because like at the end this ends up in the vehicle like company, right? And then at some point this company can claim that, okay, we have this resource like sustainably, but I think having global transparency of like a supply chain, that's why this should be like regulated at the global level. And I mentioned about like UNIS7, where we have this opportunity actually to, yeah, like we can find out, okay, this is like the critical mineral sourcing from Indonesia or Africa. So yeah, so from the, I mean, like it's important to have like more safeguarding for these like corporates that claim that they have, high number of like ESG, for instance. So yeah.
I was thinking also that what is different is opportunity, right? It's like, as I said, we are in a crossroad. Either we go to more inequality and additional risk, or we take this opportunity. And for me, the opportunity is made of the geopolitical context, as difficult as it is right now, but the fact that these minerals are so in need by powerful countries give additional leverage to producers. Whether we take it or not, that's a different thing, right? Whether we act in solidarity together to avoid, this race to the bottom, that everybody competing, lowering taxes, and taking out all of the social and environmental standards, and etc. That's a possible path. But we could not take that path because we have more leverage in this context. The second piece is, I think that there is consumers there, right? Like this is minerals for energy, for clean technologies. And so I think there is a little bit of more conscious from those that are using those minerals for the type of products they are using it, that we could leverage more again, because of course all these electric vehicles or these iPhones or etc. that we are using, there is interest from consumers. There are a lot of standards out there. How do we leverage that momentum is also important. And again, this South-South collaboration, I think there is opportunity because there is more possibilities to communicate, to share lessons, not only across governments but across civil society. And I think that the power of those networks is not to underestimate. And I would emphasize what you said about the UNEA process, because I think Colombia put already there a resolution for the possibility to discuss a treaty around critical minerals, right? And around minerals and around social and environmental standards. Of course, there is a long road to think about that possibility, but there is already support from Ecuador, I think from Zambia, Oman. And so if we are able to build that momentum in Africa in December, there could be also another pathway apart from what is been happening here in the Just Transition Work Program.
Thank you so much, Anna, for these words. So we're just going to make the last round table with our panelists for your last words, guys. We start with Ryan. What's your conclusion, your last words on this panel?
Sorry, Anna, but I like how you wrap up, like South-South cooperation. I would say, like we need to have like a South-South cooperation to push, and as you said, we are the one like having leverage because the sources are, like the sources that the global South have. So I think let's have like South-South cooperation and like we need to like have like a power bargain, I would say, as a global South.
Mine is a bit biased. I might promote my report from Greenpeace Africa, but I think leveraging on the knowledge that exists, and this is of course new knowledge. The term critical minerals, transition minerals, green minerals, strategic minerals. We're still even debating the term today. But an important caveat to all of this is knowledge, capacity building. And to echo you there, Anna, on the importance of sharing lessons among civil society, the importance of also becoming authorities in the room. That's something that I think is very much relegated or rather privileged for the mining companies. There are experts sitting right here next to me, speaking on these issues that have geopolitical importance, and just building that on that knowledge and producing that, and also advising even negotiators is already a step in the right direction. So we need to build the capacity. We need to keep going in terms of being the authorities in the room, because we also are civil society. We're the last line of defense between the other side and the communities and the people we say we represent. So I'll end on that note.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I'm a firm believer in collaborations and in supporting each other. Because if you go around the negotiations, if you go around this COP venue, there seems to be some silos. There's my voice, then there's my voice, and there's your voice. And we stand to lose a lot more if we don't stand together. We need to realize that we are standing for a united South-to-South cooperation, and as opposed to our varying divergent views. So let's keep pushing for that. Let's keep engaging. Let's keep leveraging those networks and platforms as and when necessary, and we'll fight at another time when we've won the battle and we've gone beyond seeing what it is that we need and having the power that we need and very much deserve. So thank you.
I think I'll just take the activist line and say bam, bam, bam. That's my last line to say that we need to push the BLM action mechanism, the Just Transition Work mechanism, as much as possible, regardless what happens today. I think when all is said and done, what we have set is this idea that the just transition will be a global initiative. It will be a global drive to remind ourselves that another world is possible. We don't have to live in the type of world that we live, and that's really the power behind this push for the just transition mechanism. And I hope you take that with you, that we are building a world of hope and not one of fear. Thanks.
Thank you, Kuda. And I think I will build on your optimism, because I think what we need is vision and taking that opportunity. I think who would have thought that there would be some reference to mining or mining governance in a UNFCCC text at some point in history? We were in one of these COPs 3 years ago with the side events, actually with the Congo, with the DRC delegation hosting an event on minerals, and it was a very, side event. Nobody was talking about minerals, and now it is in one text. So it is, far from done, and we can be easily defeated by this, reality that you express in your question about what lives matter or in your pictures. But I think we are getting there progressively, and so remain with that vision and that sense of opportunity.
Thank you so much for these words, Anna, for these closing remarks. What we need is hope, but also action. And we'll also need, way beyond these rooms, these forums, young Africans, Europeans, South Africans, South America, wherever in the world, but also the global north, to link up, work together on the Just Transition work program. So on this note, we thank you all, those who attend online, but also those who are present in the room, for joining us for this panel. Thank you so much.